Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Irenic Ref podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gross. The word irenic means aimed at or aiming towards peace. And my goal with this podcast is to try to create a bridge between coaches and officials by showing the humanity of each other in a more robust way, which isn't necessarily achievable in the minimal interactions a coach and official may experience during a game. With all that said, let's get to it. Today's guest is going into her 10th year as a high school coach and 9th year as a head coach. In her 8 years as a head coach, 2 of her teams have qualified for the state tournaments, and one unfortunately being in 2020. But that was the first time that team, the girls' varsity team, had qualified for a state tournament since 1997. And just this last season, her team claimed 6th place at the state tournament. In that 2020 season, she was also named the Region 2 Coach of the Year. Her teams have won the Big East Conference Tournament Championship, have been the Lake Central Conference champions, and have claimed the Big East regular season championship 5 times. She has 133 wins and a career winning percentage of 73%. She graduated from Hanson High School and played under Coach Jim Bridge, who is currently the second most winningest coach in South Dakota basketball history for girls. And currently she teaches 5th and 6th grade math at Flandreau. Please welcome Coach Megan Severtson. Coach, Megan, thanks for joining me this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about something right away. Coach Bridge, obviously, it's crazy to think about. So both of us, for those that don't know and are watching now, both of us graduated from Hanson High School. I didn't get to know Megan very well through high school. She graduated before I even got there, but it's just like through officiating, just through, seeing each other here and there, through your brother, Trevor, who I played football, basketball, you name it, with, we kind of got to know each other a little bit better. But then, being under Jim Bridge, tell me about that a little bit more, and maybe even some of the things that you've taken to your game from some of his coaching styles.
Yeah, no, I definitely was very fortunate to be a part of the Hanson basketball program. I think the number one thing I take from Coach Bridge and have tried to instill in my program is just a culture and with an expectation of winning. Because that's one thing that is definitely prevalent in Hanson. Coach Bridge has had an incredibly successful career. A number of athletes have come out of Hanson and had great college careers. So we were pretty fortunate to have the support system in Alexandria as well. Just a group that loves their sports, loves their high school sports, and has a lot of pride in what we do.
Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. And it's crazy to think about how, so I went to Dakota State, and I felt like the boosters at Dakota State was far not as like expected for a college as coming out of Hanson, where the boosters are just incredible. And it's just one of those experiences. You're like, this is kind of weird. This is backwards. You'd think the college would be more, but, and now thankfully, okay, I'm just going to plug DSU. I'm sorry, but DSU's boosters are really, really, have gone a long way from there, and scholarships are up and things like that. So anyway, besides the point, that's not about the point of this podcast. It's about you today. And so tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, where you grew up. We talked about that a little bit, but you can tell us a little bit more where you grew up, family, anything you want to talk about in that personal introduction here.
Yeah, I grew up, like you mentioned, in Alexandria, South Dakota, super small town. Got recruited by a few schools, ended up at Augustana, where I met my husband, who has lived in Flandreau, and he has a farm here. So we're here for life. He has a cow calf operation. Together we have 2 kids, Beckett, who is 7, and Elliot, who is 4. But yeah, that's kind of, it's hard. One of your questions, we talked about hobbies, and I was like, well, what do I do for a hobby? I feel like we're so busy. I'm very passionate about teaching, so I spend a lot of time with professional development, trying to be a better math teacher. And then we're just super involved in the community of Flandreau, both being small town people, We understand that that's what it takes to make a community flourish, is people who are invested. So I think that's how my husband and I would be described.
Yeah, and it's really funny thinking about like officials and coaches how they have like coaching is a lot or officiating is a lot, but then you're talking about you've got farming like a small town, a smaller town, you've got farming, which is then another thing on top of that, and some other officials, they do other things as well, like their own part-time job. But
Yeah,
it's crazy to think like even some coaches are like go way above and beyond and do like, okay, I got farming, but then I'm also coaching golf and I'm also coaching cross country. And it's like,
yeah.
I'm blown away by some of those coaches. I mean, but like you talked about though, is you're trying to continue to be better at your craft of teaching math as well. And so maybe talk about that a little bit more. Like, what are some things that you've done in the past 5 to 10 years, like with your professional development, that you think has really made an impact on your teaching as well as helping your students learn?
One of the things that I did was actually last year. It was the Dakota Dreams Leadership Academy,
Okay.
and I thought that that was really cool. Taught me a lot about how to be a active leader in our school district, and then also it helped me in coaching quite a bit. A
Okay.
lot of the things that they talked about, I could relate to what I was doing as a basketball coach. So that was cool because it was kind of a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
I'm currently getting my master's in leadership and administration, so that's time consuming.
Yep.
And then I've done a couple different regional like math workshops, like they were called regional math circles, where we would get groups of math teachers together and just share ideas and strategies. So that was a lot of fun too. I take a lot of pride in my teaching. I know there's a stereotype of the coach that doesn't teach and just watches film all day long, and
Yeah.
I think that if my coworkers would agree that I don't quite fit that stereotype. But with that, I need a lot of help. So my husband helps out a ton during season. Not helps out. He takes a lot of the responsibility during the season for, making supper, getting kids from daycare, all of that. My mother-in-law is huge in taking some of the load too with my kids, and and then my daycare too. So
Yeah.
without those people in my life, I wouldn't be able to do something I'm so passionate about, whether that be teaching or coaching.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very fortunate there.
Yeah. And I mean, and that kind of speaks to, what I see you as a coach as well. Like you're putting everything into it. I don't know. I just didn't, in my brain, it's not like you're the type that's going to sit in your classroom, and just be like, I'm going to watch film all day. It's like, you're the
I
type of
wish.
person. Yeah. You're the type of person that I mean, maybe it's just my brain thinking Alexandria is awesome and stereotypical Alexandria student athlete is like, you're going to work hard in everything that you're doing and not just, you know, go wishy-washy on one and then be 100% on the other.
Yeah.
Um, is the thing you mentioned, the Dreamers, is there a link to, find that and to, because I can post that in the comments of the podcast if you want to share that with me later. That way other
You know,
people, if
it was funded through the state of South Dakota,
okay,
and I think they took three more cohorts this year,
okay,
and I don't know if they're continuing it. And it's like the deadline's already closed.
okay.
So, but that could be something that I will send you just in case if they ever open it up again. I would encourage it, coaches and future potential district leaders to take part in it because it was really good.
Okay, yeah, awesome. If that ends up being something we can do, I'll link it in the notes
Yeah,
below in the podcast, and then other people can find that if they're really passionate about that as much as you are. So,
yeah, perfect.
yeah, let's talk about more about how you got started in coaching. We know you played at Augie, as you just said, and obviously you played in high school. What got you started into coaching instead of some other direction with your life?
Well, I had many different directions I was initially going, so
Yeah.
enough to drive my dad pretty crazy, actually. Um, I actually told my dad all through college I was not going to be a teacher. He encouraged it, and that kind of tells you what my dad and our relationship is like.
Sure.
Sometimes we kind of butt heads. But I decided to do business marketing and accounting
Yeah.
in college, actually, and I took some time to intern in that field. Um, was an admission counselor at Augie and was very happy with what I was doing there. and got a random phone call in September. Southwest Minnesota State in Marshall was looking for an assistant coach. And my boyfriend at the time was already there as a GA, who's now my husband, was there. And so I was like, well, I'll go try it out. Prior to that, I had a lot of recruiting experience, obviously, but not a ton of coaching experience other than some like private lesson stuff. Yeah, I had a great experience in Marshall, but when Brett was done with his GA position and knew he was moving back to South Dakota, I decided to make the move as well. And I actually was a part of the opening staff for the Sanford Pentagon. Did that, was worked under the director, did some stuff there. Was actually working a basketball camp one day, and the superintendent of some school in Iowa came up to me and said, do you have your teaching degree? Because I want to hire you right now. And I didn't. So about a week later, I re-enrolled in school and got my teaching degree, and ended up just working out where I was able to kind of start coaching as I joined the Flandreau School District. So, and like I said, that was it. After that, I knew I was locked into the community, and I saw that as being a really a good job that could make an impact in the community, knowing that that's where my kids were going to grow up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, I guess.
Yeah. So in along that process, were there people kind of in your ear besides the superintendent that you mentioned? Were there other people in your ear that kind of were you mentioned your dad kind of talking about he's like you should teach. Was there anybody else that was kind of chirping in your ear, or even like, I don't know, Mr. Bridge sending a message to you being like, hey, you'd be a good coach, anything like that?
Well, the world is weird. So my dad played baseball and football at Dakota State.
Yeah.
And one of his baseball teammates is Brian Ralph,
Okay.
who is the middle school principal in Flandreau. And also that was the head girls basketball coach at the time.
Okay.
So kind of as I moved into the community, I mentioned to him, like, I'm interested in coaching here. And I didn't have any intention of really being a head coach. I kind of fell into coaching, honestly. I would have been happy being his assistant for a long time.
Okay.
He's a really, really great guy. I thought he ran his program really well. But it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
After being there for a year, he decided to step down, and I applied for it, and I guess, yeah, that's kind of how that ended up. But he was also a factor in it, in kind of getting me into Flandreau, encouraging me to take those steps. Rick Weber,
Yeah.
the superintendent of Flandreau, was very helpful and kind of guiding me into what I needed to do to become a teacher, because my path was kind of different, non-traditional.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those two people were definitely an influence in getting me to Flandreau and stepping into coaching, or taking the step into coaching. Yeah.
So, talking about, you said Brian, correct? Talking
Yeah,
about
Brian
him
Ralph. Yep.
as well as, you know, as you're thinking about coaching and you're like, okay, I'm going to coach, I'm going to apply for head coaching. Okay, now it's like, what is my structure going to be as a coach? Like, what is my system going to be? What are my philosophies going to be? Did you think mainly when you're going in, with what Brian had taught you in the system? Was it what you had acquired through Augie? Was it back from high school with Coach Bridge? Any of those things, like, were they all together? Or, like, what was it initially, and then what is it now?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things I had to get over as I became a head coach was that you're no longer playing.
Yeah.
Um, that the competitive part, or like um, not wanting to take a timeout because you just, like, player mentality, we're
Yeah.
just going to get the next basket. So like some of those things, I thought I had it figured out what I was going to do. And I remember the very first game against Chester, my first year as head coach, being like, oh, we're gonna look good. This new offense is nice, and it was awful. And my girls looked like a disaster. And Alan Bertram, who's probably one of my bigger mentors when it comes to coaching, his daughter, I was coaching, and
Yeah.
I just called him and I was like, what am I doing? And so, I mean, I've been really, really fortunate. I've had a lot of great mentors that have definitely impacted me in how I coach. As far as our style of play, um, I'm very different than Coach Ralph and as to how our girls play. I'm probably a little more hectic. He's very much a play it safe guy.
Sure.
And so he's good. I mean, having him on the bench is always good for me because he brings
Yeah.
me down a little bit.
Sure.
But that was definitely influenced by my style of play as a player. Also, things that I picked up at Augie and SMSU along the way. SMSU was great for me because I learned a lot about how to teach defense. That wasn't necessarily something that was taught as much in high school or in college for me.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Hey everyone, quick break here. I know you want to get back to hear more from Megan, and I just want to let everybody know that a lot of these interviews happened back last summer and fall time, and so some of the information that you're hearing may be a little outdated. And so just wanted to keep you informed about that. Not that we didn't understand that Jim Bridgenow is the winningest coach in South Dakota or some other things that we had addressed. Those all happened back in the fall, these interviews, and so just wanted to keep you updated with that some things may be a little outdated in some of these interviews. Again, thank you, and here is back to Megan.
All right. So now let's talk about a fun story or two that you have as it relates to your coaching, whether that was, at SMSU, whether that was um, even, as that first year at Flanger as an assistant, or any of the ones that you experienced as a head coach. Tell us a fun story about your coaching experience.
Yeah. I think like one of the most fun things about coaching for me is the relationship aspect of it. And when I think about like the number of coaches who have acted as mentors to me and how important that is for new coaches, that's probably one of the most fun things that I enjoy doing as a coach is mentoring new coaches, and then also just talking basketball with others. I've been super spoiled. I mentioned Alan Bertram and Brian Ralph earlier, but being coached by Coach Krauth, Bill Marquardt, those guys too, they've obviously made a big impact on me, and I've been able to talk with them a lot about some ideas. Tom Young is another one. And then actually over the last year, I've gotten to know Mike Jewett even more. He's a Flanger guy, an Augie guy. So getting to know him and learn from them, I find that to be incredibly enjoyable. As far as like a coaching experience, I think that any opportunity I have for like my own children to be involved makes it easier on me as a coach because of the times I'm missing out with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about like St. Thomas More last year, beating them in the round of 16, and my kids like running out onto the court. Like that was enjoyable for me too. There's a lot of ups and downs in coaches and in coaching, and I think I probably am pretty hard on myself. So I have a hard time of always saying like this is what I enjoy. But I
Yeah.
know those things are pretty important to me. Having my kids call my basketball girls my girls,
Yeah.
and them knowing that they're like a part of our family is neat because now like I've been coaching long enough now where my players are getting married and they're
Yeah.
having babies and knowing that and they're playing college ball too like that's
Yeah.
really fun. Just knowing that you had a small part in that is what makes coaching special for me.
Yeah, for sure. Um, all the experiences there and all like you were talking about how you really wanted to make an impact in your community and be a leader, and you see that going off, and that I can just about imagine how, heartfelt that is for you and really plays into, you can't just choose one. There's a bunch of experiences
Yeah.
that make up and put into that your coaching.
And none of them were really like wins and losses, which is
Yeah.
interesting because that's where you put so much weight on yourself during the season,
Yep.
and it just takes like a year of reflecting or like the off season of reflecting to realize like it's a little more than that.
Yeah. For sure. I agree with that. Now let's talk about a memorable interaction with an official. It can be with me if you have one there. If not, any official that comes to mind that you have had a memorable one. It can be a good one, a fun one. It can be maybe kind of a weird one. Anything
Yeah.
like that that kind of sticks in your brain.
I've I've despite my husband's encouragement, I've never gotten a technical as a coach.
Okay.
So I'm pretty well behaved on the sidelines, I think. Um, my I it's funny because like in our area we have so many of the same officials like
Yeah.
every other night, Terry Duffy, Pete Entringer, Scott Mack. So I have like good relationships with those guys where I can typically like joke around with them, some banter back and forth. You don't banter with Terry Duffy. I'll say that. You don't banter with but Pete is good about it. Scott Mack, you can joke
Yep.
around with a little bit, but um, actually the experience that came to mind is a story that I do tell, and Gary Duffy is a part of it.
Okay.
Uh, we were we were in DeSmit. I think it was double overtime um, game, and DeSmit is a tough place to play. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Playing against Doug Ostis is the other team's coach, and he's intense and he's a yeller, and um, I'm upset with some calls uh, that I thought were made out of position. So I try. I am face to face. And I when I tell this story, I say belly to belly
Yep.
because I was 7 months pregnant
Sure.
um, with Gary Duffy, and
Yep.
that was the closest I've been to a technical. Is that time? But that's about the extent of my rough ref stories, I guess. But
Sure.
we're pretty lucky. We have really good officials. As a female and as a coach of female athletes, when you have officials that take women's sports just as serious as they do a men's game,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, and I put a lot of stake in that. So, and I feel like in our area we do have those guys who care about the game, and that's been fun. I think I've only had you as a ref like 2 or 3 times, and I think we've lost all three.
Probably,
So,
probably true. Yeah, it might be
yeah,
me
so
that's the
it's
problem.
maybe it's you.
No, actually, I think you may have lost two of them. I know you did win one for a fact because it was right before the 2020 state tournament, which got canceled. You ended up beating, I can't remember, not West Central, Garrett's West Central, West Central in the
Yeah.
Sodax 16 game.
Yep.
So you did win that one. You did
Correct.
take. So the other game I had, which was another great one, was the Sioux Falls Christian one in Harrisburg. And
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately in overtime, but I mean, it was one of those where you're a 12 seed versus a 5 seed. And so,
Mhm.
kudos to you for the team play and the coaching strategy you had in that game. But yeah,
Yeah.
those are really the only two that I remember. There might
All
have been
right.
another one regular season, but for sure. And
All
I
right.
and the funny thing is yeah, I've never had a bad interaction with you. I think a few times you like gave a jab and I'm just like, that's funny. And I'm going to keep moving on. But it wasn't anything bad. A lot of times it was really funny because you're like, gross, gross. And you just like said that. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's probably true. You're probably right. I'll watch that next time. I probably
Yeah.
missed something because that's just, I mean, the nature of the beast is like, for me as an official, if I'm like focused on something and then something else is happening, then I don't know. If you bring it to my attention, now I'm focusing on that and something else might happen. But
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of got to weigh those two things. But at the same time, it's like, if you tell me something, now I'm going to look at that. And if I don't see it, or if I, because you had said you never got one as a coach. So I was like, so did you only get one in college then, or did you get a few?
Yes. I
Okay.
I cussed, not at an official.
Yeah.
I missed a shot, and I quietly cussed,
Okay.
and it's very quiet in Crookston.
Yep.
So apparently the the ref heard, and that's my only technical, I guess. So
Hey,
no, and as a coach, what I've realized is I'm not gonna agree with everything that a ref does, and that's pretty normal. But
sure.
as long as there's an open dialogue there, where like
Yep.
listen if I have a question or acknowledge me when I have a question.
Yep.
Um, I have a ton of respect for that. Like I think that that's important that coaches and officials can speak to each other respectfully.
Yep.
Um, because otherwise, no one's going to be happy. It's going to get pretty ugly.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm gonna ask a question at the end that's kind of on the lines of that. So
Okay.
we'll come back to that sort of
Okay.
communication thing at the end. Um, sort of the last double-ended question here is, what is a rule that you were glad was added and one that you do not like? So in your whole time, whether that was not during, obviously, we're talking about high school sports here. So when you're playing in high school, when you were coaching in the high school realm, what is one that you are glad that added throughout that time, and what's one that you're like, I wish it was modified or just like kind of thrown away?
Mm-hmm. Um, the shot clock um is was a good addition for the game.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, I wouldn't have made it to, or our team wouldn't have made it to the state tournament in high school if there would have been a shot clock because we stalled. So, what we called it being deliberate.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, so but as a coach and as the game grew, it was necessary. So
Yeah.
I think that the shot clock was a great addition. Um, the round of 16, I know that's not a rule, but
Yeah.
I think the round of 16 is important to have in our state. I know there's a push for a round of 32,
Sure. Yep.
which can be good and bad, depending.
Yep.
Schools in super competitive regions obviously think a round of 32 would be a great idea.
Yep.
Um, kind of in our region where you're going to have the ebbs and flows of a medium-sized A school, it
Yep.
doesn't always benefit us to do
Yep.
that. But so those are a couple. I'm one just like off comment. I'm really happy that the state of South Dakota plays out the consolation games in their state
Yeah.
tournament.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um, I think that's really cool for small schools who don't get to make it very often.
Yep.
That you have that opportunity to make a whole weekend out of it and a whole
Mm-hmm.
experience. I'm glad that we have that. I actually texted he one of my coaches. He's now coaching in Yankton, but I texted him right before this. I was like, "What's a rule I don't like?" Because I
Yeah.
couldn't really think of one, and he started laughing and he said the coach's box.
Yeah.
So I guess that is a rule that I guess I have a hard time following.
Okay.
But I'm just yelling at my girls. I'm not yelling
Yeah.
at my.
So you would probably like to see that maybe modified to even something like the college where they have like that 35-foot line instead of just the four. Well, they did extend it to 28 feet even. So
Yeah, to the baseline to 28, right?
yeah, yeah. So that
Yep,
is a
those rules.
change. Yeah. No, that is a change. I mean, I got to know that rule or else I gotta address it if it's kind of
Right.
being taken advantage of. But yeah, I mean, even 35 feet, like but I don't like, I think the thing that's tough to gauge is like NFHS is over the entire like national high school. And so I don't know what adding another 7 feet might do in other states, in other competitive areas.
Yeah.
I don't know. And some maybe coaches being 14 feet away from each other could be a bad deal in some other states versus in our state where you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense why we couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I question things and I wish things are modified, but then I also have to think, okay, they're in charge of the entire high school realm of the
Mhm.
nation and what's best for every state and every, association as well.
Right. Yeah. 'Cause I just see it's a little difficult. Like your girls are on the other side of the court,
Yeah.
um, getting information to them. Like I understand if you're on the court yelling at an official or if
Yep.
you're
Yep.
interfering with play, absolutely. Um, but yeah, that was one. I don't know how I feel about the new free throw
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, that's been a very common statement, and some people really like it based on what they've. So, like, I'll give you an example. Coach DeBeer, Brad said that he kind of liked it for the women's basketball game when he watched his daughter play, and so he thinks it might be a good addition to South Dakota and the high school realm. But again, sometimes watching it's a little bit different than when you're coaching against it and the situation
Yeah.
you get yourself in.
Yeah, I guess my concern, does it reward like undisciplined defenses?
Yep.
Um, does it reward poor free throw shooting teams? Because now you get two free throws every time.
Yep.
Yeah, some of those questions. And just from a coach's standpoint, like you have to learn how to coach in that style of game too
Yep.
now. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I wonder how I'll feel about it towards the end of the season.
For sure. And maybe we'll have to check back in and we'll provide an update there.
There
But
you go.
what was I was gonna mention something about the yeah, the shot clock. I know like uh when Trevor and I were playing, we did the first and second quarter stall game, when we played Mitchell Christian in the Corn Palace. And so it's one of those where you're like, yeah, it was really as you said, deliberate, not
Yeah.
stalling, but it was a very good strategy, but also, it makes the game what the announcers said. They're like, well, what are we talking about now? The weather or
Yeah.
because it makes it tough to commentate and people to enjoy the game. So the shot clock is a good addition, and I approve of that as well.
Hmm.
Um, okay, let's go back to I said I have a last question for you. It's you were talking about communication, open lines, things like that. So my last question is for a newer official. What's some advice you would give to them? And you talked about communication, that open line of communication, but there also might be an aspect for a newer official where they're like, I really don't know what to say, and I really don't want to box myself in a corner by saying something that's going to come back to bite me. And so, along with open communication, some pointers you'd give to a newer official. What I like, what is something that an official could say to you if they're newer? They're like, I'm calling the game as best as I can. Like, this is like, hypothetically saying, I'm calling the game best I can. And I really don't know what to say to you right this moment. Like, what's something they can say to you to ease your tension or ease anything that's like, you're like, I just want an answer. Like, what's something
Yeah.
they can do?
Um, I I honestly respect the guys that just say, "Hey, I missed it."
Yeah.
Um, or the ladies that say that. Like, I get that. And what can you really argue back as a coach
Yeah.
if you're like, "Hey, yeah, I missed that one. I'll make sure I look for it next time." So like them like that was for me. Just acknowledge that I'm talking to you.
Okay.
I think a lot of times, I don't know from like a ref's perspective what it's
Yeah.
like, female coach, male coach, experienced coach,
Yeah.
new coach. Like I don't know that side of it,
Yeah.
but for having whenever I have a newer official, just them knowing that I'm willing to visit with you. I'm not
Yep.
going to yell at you. But if I have a question, I expect you to at least address it.
Yeah.
Say, yep, I missed it, or hey, I'll watch that. That makes me feel better, I guess, in the moment.
For sure. And then any other sort of advice you'd give to a newer official getting into it like this year, or they're even an older official, but they're like in their second or third year?
I think it's really would be great for officials if they watched more film
Sure.
of themselves. I think maybe it was you, and I know I've had a couple other officials that have reached out to me post game
Yeah.
and asked for film. And I thought that was cool because I appreciate anyone who's willing to get better. Like
Yeah.
I like that. So watch film of yourself. It's everywhere. It's on YouTube. You can find it pretty easily if you don't want
Yeah.
to reach out to the coach. And just critique yourself. Take that time to learn more. And then, just as I would encourage anyone to get a mentor as a coach,
Yeah.
get a mentor as an official. Find someone that can help you along the way that you can bounce ideas off of or scenarios off of, just so, yeah, you can continue to improve.
Yeah. Awesome. That's some great advice. I know that we kind of have brushed over that, but even it's kind of interesting from a coaching perspective to say that to a new official, where some of us officials don't even say that to newer officials. So I appreciate that comment of saying, hey, find that person that you can reach out to, and they can give you the hard truths if that's what you want out of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, thanks again for coming on the podcast this evening. Only last thing, do you have any last comments for anybody watching to Flyer Nation, anything like that?
No, no, I don't have anything for Flyer Nation. I appreciate you reaching out to me. This is fun. Like I said, I enjoy talking basketball. So I really appreciate you thinking of me.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks again, Megan. Everybody, this has been the Irenic Ref podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.